Hey, welcome to Draft Academy. My name is Mike. In this tutorial, I want to talk to you guys about classes and objects in Ruby. Now, classes and objects are an extremely important concept in Ruby. So in this video, I'm going to be giving you a basic overview of what a class is, what an object is, how we can create classes, and how we can create objects. So make sure you pay attention because this is a very important topic when it comes to Ruby. Now, Ruby is an awesome language because it allows us to use all different types of data inside of our programs. So if you watched the video that I did on data types in Ruby, we looked at some of the basic data types that Ruby gives us. Things like strings, integers, floating point numbers, things like booleans, and even like the nil value, right? There's all these different types of data that we can represent and we can work with and we can use in our Ruby programs. But here's the problem, is not all things, not all information, not all objects, not all entities in the real world can be represented by just those pieces of information, right? You can't represent everything with just a string or with just a number or with just a Boolean, right? There's a lot of things in the real world, like a lot of, different things like a person or a phone or a credit card or a water bottle or a computer, a keyboard, a mouse. Like there's a lot of these real world things that can't be represented using just a string or just a number. And one of the cool things about Ruby is it allows us to create our own data types. So I could actually create my own data type that it would allow me to represent like a phone inside of my program, or that would allow me to represent a computer or a credit card or a book or a lampshade or a dog. Really anything I would want, I could represent inside of my program, and I could essentially just create my own data type. And essentially what that is, it's called a class. So we can create a class in Ruby, and a class is basically just a custom data type. So it's a data type that we can define. So I can basically say like, I want to represent a book inside of my program. And I can say, here's what a book looks like in my program. Maybe it has like a title, it has an author, it has like a certain number of pages associated to it. And then I can take that book data type and I can create individual books from there. So I can take this book class that we're going to create and I can create individual books. I can represent individual books inside of my program. So I'm going to show you guys how we can do that. We're going to create a book data type or a book class, and then we're going to create some book objects. So this is going to be pretty cool. In order to create a class, I can just come over to my Ruby file and I'm just going to type out class, and now I want to give it a name. And generally in Ruby, when we create a class, you're going to want to give it a name with a capital letter. So I could say like BOOK with capital B, and then I'm going to come down here and just type end. So remember, a class is essentially a custom data type in Ruby. So when we create a class, we're basically modeling a real world entity or a real world object inside of our program. So inside of this book class, I'm basically telling Ruby what a book is. I'm defining like, here's what a book is. And generally when we create a class, we're going to give these classes various attributes. And that's how we can create a data type. I can say, okay, here's my book class, and every book is going to have a title, it's going to have an author, and it's going to have a number of pages, right? A class is essentially like a blueprint or a template for a specific entity or object in the real world. Like a book is an actual entity in the real world, right? A book is an object that we can interact with and work with. And this class is a template or a blueprint for representing a book inside of our program. We're basically creating our own data type. So inside of this book class, I can actually define a bunch of attributes. And attributes is just going to be information that all books are going to have. So we're essentially telling Ruby like, hey, all books should have the following information. So inside of this class, I'm just going to type out attr underscore accessor, attribute accessor. And now I'm going to make a space, and over here I'm going to type in the attributes that a book should have inside of our program. So I'm just going to type a colon, and I'm going to type the name of the attribute I want to define. So all books should have a title. I'm going to put a comma. Book should have an author. And then books should also have a number of pages. So I'm just going to say pages. So essentially what I'm doing here is, again, I'm laying out the blueprint for a book inside of my program. So I'm essentially saying like, here's the book data type, and all books are going to have a title, they're going to have an author, and they're going to have pages. So this is like our overall blueprint, our overall template. So now that we've created this, now that we've told Ruby what a book is, we can actually go and create individual books inside of our programs. And these are called objects. And an object is essentially just an instance of a book or an instance of a class. So I could create a book object, and that book object would represent an individual book in my program. So I'm gonna come down here, and you can create objects essentially the same way that you create variables. And actually, as we'll learn, all variables in Ruby are actually just objects. So I'm gonna give this a name. So we'll just call this book1, and I'm gonna set it equal to book.new. I'm going to make an open and close parentheses. Basically what this is doing is it's telling Ruby that we want to create a new book. So we want to create an actual book inside of our program. In other words, we want to store the book data type inside of this book1 variable. Now down here, what I can do is I can actually give this book attributes. So remember, we defined a book up here that it's going to have a title, an author, and a number of pages. So down here, I can basically say book1.title is equal to, and we can make this like a Harry Potter book, right? So I'm basically defining what the title of this book is. And down here, I could say book2.author, and we'll make the author J.K. Rowling, and we can say, and actually, whoops, this has to be book1, I'm sorry. And then we can say book1.pages, and we can set this equal to, like, I don't know, maybe it has 400 pages or something. So essentially what I'm doing is I'm creating this book object. And remember, an object is an instance of a class. So a book object is basically just like a given book inside of our program that's going to have all of these attributes. And I'm giving it all of these different attributes. I'm assigning it some information. So what I can actually do now is I can interact with this object. So I could say puts book1.title, and this is going to print out the title of book 1 onto the screen. You see over here it's printing out Harry Potter. Over here I could print out book1.pages, and it's going to print out all of the pages in book 1, so there's 400, and we could do the same with the author. So essentially what I did was I created my own data type up here. I created a template for what a book is inside of our program. I said the book is going to have these certain attributes. I created a new instance of a book, so I created a book object, and then I gave all of those attributes specific information. So I said like the title of book 1 is going to be Harry Potter. The author of book 1 is going to be J.K. Rowling. And what's cool about objects is we can create as many of them as we want. So down here I could actually create another book. I could say book 2 is equal to book.new, and then I can start giving this some attributes. So I could say like book2.title is equal to Lord of the Rings. We could say book2.author is equal to Tolkien, and book2.pages is equal to, let's say, 500. So now I'm actually representing another separate book inside of my program. So I can come down here and say like puts book2.author, and this is going to print out the author of book 2 over here in the console. So essentially what we did, again, was we defined the template for what a book is going to be inside of our program, and this is a class, and then we can create instances of that class, which are called objects. And an object is just like an actual book. So we have the Harry Potter book, and we also have the Lord of the Rings book down here. And we can access all of the attributes from inside those books by saying book2.author or book2.pages. We can just refer to them directly. And that's one of the cool things about classes and objects, is they allow you to create your own custom data types inside of Ruby. And one of the cool things about Ruby is that everything, all data, is actually classes and objects. So all data is actually an object. A string is an object. An integer, like a number, is an object. A floating point number is an object. A Boolean is an object. All of these different things are objects, and they all have classes which define them. That's really one of the cool things about Ruby, and one thing that sets it apart from a lot of other programming languages is that everything is an object. Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and subscribe to Giraffe Academy to be the first to know when we release new content. Also, we're always looking to improve, so if you have any constructive criticism or questions or anything, leave a comment below. Finally, if you're enjoying Draft Academy and you want to help us grow, head over to draftacademy.com/contribute and invest in our future.